On April 4th, 2025, we saw one of the most unprecedented things to ever happen in gaming history. Not long after the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, in which they announced the release date and when pre-orders go live and whatnot, it was announced that due to economic conditions referring to the ongoing tariff situation, pre-orders for the Nintendo Switch 2 would be delayed in the US and will not start as originally planned on April 9th, 2025. What that meant is that based on how the tariff situation played out, Nintendo might be reconsidering prices. There's no other reason to delay pre-orders other than that enough of a potentially disrupting factor is in play that they need to kind of buy their time a little bit and gauge the situation. And this is all amidst other backlash, particularly involving the increase of MSRP for AAA game releases, with games like Mario Kart World being $80, with old Switch 1 games that are being turned into Switch 2 editions coming in between $70 to $80. Breath of the Wild, not including the DLC in the Switch 2 edition release, so you effectively have to pay $90 if you haven't bought that game yet. That's an 8-year-old game that has not received some kind of complete edition, and to actually get that complete edition, you will have to make separate payments that do add up to $90. So yeah, aside from questionable business practices, Nintendo also picked the worst time to fully unveil their console and to announce launch plans and pre-order details and whatnot, as it was on that same day that the President of the United States kind of went all out on announcing tariffs that would have a drastic economic impact. It has been 2 weeks since, and we finally got an update from Nintendo in regards to what their plans are moving forward for now, with the tariff situation being what it is currently. So right here we have an update from GameStop, a tweet that reads, "A second update from Nintendo." Attached to the tweet is a statement from Nintendo detailing the new prices. You can also find the same information on Nintendo's website. I'll go ahead and check this out right here. So the good news is that the Nintendo Switch 2's base price point for the console will remain the same. The bad news is that certain Nintendo Switch 2 accessories have become more expensive. So here's what Nintendo had to say. Nintendo maintains Nintendo Switch 2 pricing, retail pre-orders to begin on April 24th in the US. So in terms of pre-orders going live, that's a delay of about 15 days. And yeah, at launch, the price for Switch 2 in the US will remain as announced on April 2nd at $450. And then the Nintendo Switch 2 plus Mario Kart World Bundle will remain $500. And then unfortunately, titles like Mario Kart World, whose $80 MSRP has proven to be extremely controversial, that will remain the same at $80 for both physical and digital versions. There are apparently some countries where physical versions are like $10 more, but at least in the US and in a lot of regions, physical and digital versions will have price parity. Still, $80 MSRP, $10 more than we have ever seen for like the base price of a major game release. Nintendo is essentially trying to set this as the new ground. All other game companies will follow suit. So it's not just the Nintendo ecosystem that's about to get more expensive. All of gaming is about to get more expensive. Now, it's worth noting that Nintendo chose their words very carefully and added that at launch, the prices will remain the same at $450 to $500. So there is a possibility that down the line, if tariffs worsen, if the impact of the tariffs begin to get much worse, Nintendo may adjust those price points. In fact, there's a bit of the statement right here that reads, "Other adjustments to the price of any Nintendo product are also possible in the future, depending on market conditions." So we're definitely not out of the woods yet, and it seems as though currently the most certain time to purchase the Nintendo Switch 2 at its announced MSRP of $450 is essentially as soon to launch as possible while this remains intact. Meanwhile, when it comes to Nintendo Switch 2 accessories, those, according to Nintendo, will experience price adjustments due to changes in market conditions. You can see the new prices right here. Now, what Nintendo doesn't do is compare old prices with new prices. Thankfully, we have social media folks like Nintendo here coming in clutch with this chart that details the price difference. Switch 2 accessories were already more expensive than Switch 1 accessories. Now that gap is that much greater. So for example, the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro controller, which had an MSRP of $80, which is $10 more than the Switch 1 Pro controller, is now $85. So a $5 price increase. Same with the Joy-Con 2 pair. A pair of Joy-Con 1s was $80. A pair of Joy-Con 2s was $90. It is now $95. A $5 price increase. And that kind of remains relatively consistent, except for a few things like the Joy-Con 2 strap, which has gone up by $1 in MSRP. The Joy-Con wheel set, that's gone up by $5. The Switch 2 camera, that's gone up by $5. And then there's the Switch 2 dock, which is significantly more expensive than the Switch 1 dock because the Switch 2 dock does come in with a fan. So there are additional components that make it significantly more expensive. And now it's going to be even more expensive with the tariffs, a price increase of $10 from $110 to $120. And then the Switch 2 AC adapter from $29 to $35. So yeah, price increases vary, but it's anywhere between $5 to $10 across the board. So yes, at launch, Nintendo's keeping the base price point of the base Nintendo Switch 2 console package the same, but they've increased the price of elements surrounding the ecosystem that will chip away at your wallet. So just be aware of this. This stuff will start to add up. And that goes doubly true if Nintendo hasn't addressed the drift issues on the Joy-Cons. They did announce, or they did confirm rather, that Joy-Con 2 controllers will not feature Hall effect sticks, which was disappointing news. Hall effect sticks do a much better job of preventing drift in analog sticks, and the Nintendo Switch 2 not kind of making that leap technologically to really make sure that this is no longer an issue. And with Nintendo not addressing whether they've worked on Joy-Cons not getting as much drift as we saw in the Switch 1 era, if Joy-Con drift remains an issue on the Switch 2, then you'll be continuously spending $95 for a new pair. Or the other option is go through the insufferable process of sending your Joy-Cons in to Nintendo and waiting for them to get back to you. And even then, it's not guaranteed that they will fix your stuff or, replace the Joy-Cons. And so, yeah, ultimately, this is not the best news. It's not as bad as it could have been in the sense that at least the Nintendo Switch 2 itself, the base package, pricing-wise remains the same, but it is still overall a more expensive ecosystem we're about to engage in. As for why things played out the way they did, well, President Trump did announce a 90-day pause on reciprocal tariffs, with the exception of China. And with Nintendo having moved manufacturing for the Nintendo Switch to Vietnam back in 2019, which once upon a time was significantly affected by the tariffs until this pause exempted all countries except for China for now, it seems as though Nintendo, at least over the next 90 days, feels safe to charge the same for the Nintendo Switch 2, whose components are manufactured in Vietnam. But when it comes to accessories, it seems as though some of that stuff is definitely made in China. And so that would explain why the accessories specifically received a price bump as a result of the ongoing situation with tariffs that could change at any moment. Honestly, the tariff situation has been so volatile with very little in the way of like a clear plan or vision that companies don't know what to do and are basically saying prices can change based on how the tariffs chaotically change. And so that area is kind of chaos. But for now, at least, this is what we know. And these are the factors you need to have in mind in terms of price point as we start delving into the Switch 2 ecosystem and, the potential financial impact that could have on players. It's also worth noting that on April 11th, the U.S. president excluded from the reciprocal tariffs a host of electronics. Now, that's not to say that electronics are now exempt from tariffs, but rather they've been moved to another tariff bucket. So it's just like in another group now or something. This is in large part to appease to a lot of American electronics companies who do import a lot of stuff from countries that are being tariffed or are aimed to be tariffed. But there's still a lot of uncertainty surrounding that. So what kind of impact that will ultimately have on electronics as a whole, and in turn gaming as a whole, still remains to be seen. Again, it's still an ongoing situation, a developing situation, which is why Nintendo put out the possibility that after launch, prices could change. And when that happens, I'll keep you guys updated. But right now, this is what we know. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on the new price points for Switch 2 accessories and whether that alters your disposition towards the Switch 2 in any way, and just what you think about the Switch 2 announcements and launch plans in general right now, the pricing of games, the pricing of everything, and then the hardware itself and the games that they've announced. Just what are the pros and cons currently of the Nintendo Switch 2? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.